Modern Dragon Ball has been one of the biggest hot and cold debates in the anime space ever since Super came out all the way back in 2015. You know, some love it and there's those who hate it. I myself have a love-hate relationship with it. The movies themselves, I think, are phenomenally done. The Broly movie did a great job of canonizing a longtime fan favorite character. And the superhero movie was a breath of fresh air in the sense of focusing on a character or characters other than Goku and Vegeta for once, which thank you so much. Even if I myself have my own qualms about that movie and the nostalgia baiting that's done in that movie, Dragon Ball Daima, however, sits in a really good spot for me. Even though it in itself is not absolved of the same nostalgia baiting, I think of all the new content that we've had for Dragon Ball, it does it the best. Why? Because it's not canon. I believe Dragon Ball content post Z is at its best when it doesn't have to worry about how everything else relates to it and it fits in a timeline. And to clarify, I'm not saying throw everything out the window. You know, you still have to respect the source material in some way. So in today's video, I want to discuss why something like Dragon Ball Daima works so much better as a continuation of Dragon Ball, specifically Z, I guess, more so than something like Super. I want to discuss the reason why it succeeds where Super fails, and finally how I think a modern day Dragon Ball should be handled. So with all that out the way, as usual, thank you guys so much for the support that you've been showing. You know, keep subbing, liking, and commenting, and I really do read all of the comments that you guys comment. I promise you I do. Without that out the way, let's get it done. Now, it's no secret to regular watchers of this channel that I'm not the biggest fan of Dragon Ball Super. You know, I believe the anime is generally one of the biggest affronts to the work that Toriyama did all the way up until Battle of Gods. So I won't rip into it too much because I've made plenty of other videos doing that. If you like them, go check them out. They're on this channel. They're on the thumbnail. You'll see the thumbnail. They're there, and I think they're really good. I'm proud of them. So, but I just want this video to be a positive one. So Daima right off the bat feels more like Dragon Ball than it does Dragon Ball Z, which is a good thing. And what do I mean by that? It's not trying to just reheat DBZ's nachos the same way Super does. It's not about hype moments and aura from the get-go. Daima establishes a story that sets us on an adventure, and it also starts to explore a part of the Dragon Ball universe that was established long ago, whether through other characters such as Demon King Dabura or video games with Dragon Ball's Universe 1 and 2. Yeah, because Mira and Toa were in there. But it's a part of the universe that we never explored. And this isn't to say that Super doesn't do this, but it's once again in arcs where I think Super really found its footing, which is, for example, the Moro arc. And through Maris, who I think is a really good character, and I really look forward to him being animated in the Galactic Patrol arc. And overall, I just think the Moro arc is the best arc in Super. But the Demon Realm is something that was always talked about, and it was never explored, which already is a great premise. It seeks to expand established lore, and the reason for going there just makes so much sense. Dende being kidnapped by Goma, which makes the Dragon Balls irrelevant because he's a baby again, so I'm pretty sure the Dragon Balls couldn't work, but it was brilliant. It's a brilliant setup as to why we're going to the Demon Realm. And I think divinity in Dragon Ball was always kind of done best through the Kais. The Supreme Kai, for example, you know, being what should have been the strongest of all the 4 Kais, because there's North, South, East, and West, and then I think he's the 5th Kai, and them being the creator gods. But the one criticism I will say I really have of Daima is the whole turning them into children thing. That's the only thing I wasn't particularly fond of, you know, because it is, again, nostalgia baiting, so that I will call it out for that. But the characters and how they're done in Daima are a huge thing. I believe Daima does the characters way better than Super does. While everyone isn't exactly present, the characters we follow get some much needed development to the story. Piccolo and Shin in particular. The idea that Namekians came from the Demon Realm does so much for their lore. You know, it also gives a reason as to why they may be so magically inclined throughout the story, especially in relation to the Dragon Balls. And if you look into it a little bit further, kind of how I thought, it might even explain where the dragon themselves come from, with them being an analogy to genies who often have a demonic roots. So the idea that the Namekians came from the Demon Realm, I like it. And the whole Kai's or Shin's race coming from the Demon Realm to create the universe, I'm cool with it. You know, I don't not like it. I don't really have an opinion on that, but it's cool, I guess. So there's that. But before I continue, I know I said I didn't like them being kids again, but I will say the way it was handled was good, at least better than it was in GT, because the only real detriment that they experienced was adjusting to their childlike bodies again. With GT and Goku being wished to be a kid again and him being weaker never really made sense to me, because it's not like time was being rewound to, you know, make him weaker. No, he was just wished to be a kid again. So him having the same amount of power, maybe he can't manage it as well, made more sense than him just being outright weaker and having to depend on Super Saiyan 4 all the time, which, you know, it's a reason to see Super Saiyan 4. I love Super Saiyan 4. But moving on to what I think modern Dragon Ball fans really care about, and it's transformation, guys. Let's be honest here. I love them too. We all love transformations. Daima seeks to build on what was already been established, instead of going a new route that ends up just being a color palette swap all the time. Yes, I will always call out Super for this. But Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta has been a thing that the fandom has been asking for the longest time. It's bad how much we've been asking for it. It's been in like fan games for not fan games, it's been in what if scenarios for games for forever. So it never made sense to me post Buu Saga that Vegeta never tries to achieve the form, especially since in Super he's back to being rivals with Goku again, because I remember Goku saying that Super Saiyan 3 is an incomplete form and it drains your ki heavy. Why wouldn't Vegeta try to one-up Goku and perfect that form? You know, at the end of Z, I'm okay with it because we see Vegeta fully accept that Goku was number one. He himself says it. Then finally, the biggest reveal, which is Super Saiyan 4. And while I still prefer the original design and overall just aesthetic of the form, I do like how animalistic it is. Goku runs on all fours, reminiscent of an actual ape. You know, his hands are larger, making it seem like he would be right at home in a forest as an ape or something. You know, this builds even more on the great ape idea and taming it, and that being the derivative of Super Saiyan 4. Like, Super Saiyan 4 is the perfection of the great ape form, and the story overall is just very engaging in my opinion. You know, the setup, the fights, and everything have reasons as to why they are happening. It's an adventure with mystery, not a tournament disguised as an adventure. The one thing I will say I wasn't particularly fond of was the villain. You know, I know Goma was supposed to be a gag villain. He kind of was. He was menacing a little bit, but I do appreciate, you know, the whole gag villain, but he just wasn't that memorable to me. And I'm not saying he needs to be this universal menacing threat the whole time. We don't need that every time. I just wasn't particularly intimidated by him. Like, say how someone like Mercenary Tao, who I think balances the line of being or of having gags while also being a very intimidating villain. But overall, Daima is a great homage to what OG Dragon Ball stories should be while balancing elements from Z. All right, so I'm just gonna say right out the gate, I don't think there should be a direct continuation to Dragon Ball in any way, shape, or form, especially because while Toriyama was involved with the creation of Super, he himself was not writing the story, so it'll never really live up to what it could actually be. And if Toei wanted to keep milking Dragon Ball as much as they have, because it's so obvious that they do, it should have been through movies or non-canon series. Daima shines because it's not bound by the continuity that flows into Super or even majority of what came before it. It respects the source material enough to use it to establish, say, power levels and why the story is occurring, which, if we're being honest, is all Dragon Ball fans really care about. But it expands on things that we've known before, you know, the lore of the Supreme Kais, the lore of the Namekians, and the just lore of the Dragon Balls in general. I think Daima does a great job of expanding on those things, and you can choose and you can pick. I think post story continuations are done well when you can pick and choose what you want to believe. I know that sounds so crazy to say, but the thing with Super is that it will make people who blindly love Dragon Ball happy, but people who go to it expecting something, you know, like how original Dragon Ball was or how Z was, won't really get that until, I say again, up until the Moro arc. But I believe, you know, just everything that happens in Super, if it was done maybe in a non-canon movie, it would have been great. I'm just gonna say that. You know, they could also switch it up a little bit if they wanted to. But I think that's the answer. People love the old DBZ movies, and absolutely none of them fit into the canon, except for maybe that last one, because it's like post Buu Saga. But we accept them regardless. False Super Saiyan gets to exist as its own thing without people trying to make it a thing, without people trying to make a thing of it. Like, they're like, oh yeah, like False Super Saiyan, like that don't make no sense. Why it's not in the story? Like, blah, blah, blah. And to make this work though, I think characterization is crucial above all else, which makes sense because the thing people complain about the most in Super is characterization. The key to having a good Dragon Ball adaptation in any way, shape, or form is that you need, or just a good adaptation of anything that has been long running, is that you understand these characters, you get these characters right, and you get their characterization right. If you don't get the characterization right, it doesn't matter how phenomenal your story is, it's not gonna land. Because you could tell me a Shakespearean level story and put Goku in there, but if Goku's acting like, say, like Superman or something, it's not going to work. It's not going to be a good Dragon Ball story. It'll be a good story objectively, just not a good Dragon Ball story. But imagine if, say, the Super story were set up as a series of movies, as I previously said, that can be its own thing separate from Z, and then Daima being its own set of movies separate from Z and Super. And maybe even the idea of, you know, go do a GT movie set somewhere along the timeline before Goku leaves with Shenron. Those things would honestly print money. You know, just having maybe 3 different timelines of Dragon Ball would, and honestly, it works because Dragon Ball is set up to have alternate timelines. So have it and fully establish it that, say, Super is its own timeline, GT is its own timeline, and Daima is its own timeline, because Daima has a different version of Super Saiyan 4 than GT does, and you know, the God forms in Super in itself is already its own freaking thing. Like, that's not going to connect. Or maybe you could just not have the GT thing at all, because then you'd have 2 Super Saiyan 4s, and that would be kind of confusing for people, if we're being honest. But also not really at the same time. So it's kind of up to you on what you want to do with that. But I think Dragon Ball does benefit from being, or at least the post-series content benefits from not being canon, because it doesn't mess with anything that people have already grown to love and accept. And everyone would get something of their own flavor of Dragon Ball and not be bound by the continuity, because retcons are the biggest thing with long running shows, and this is a really cool way to do things without ignoring things that occurred in the past. But Daima, as I've said before, feels like a love letter to all things Dragon Ball, not just Z. And while it does do nostalgia baiting, because that's kind of just, it's part of, you know, modern day shows, because everything's being remastered, everything's being redone, retold in its own way. So the nostalgia is involved in everything. But one thing with Super is that it feels like transformations are made first and the story is told to justify them being thrown in. I love transformations in Dragon Ball, bro. I love Super Saiyan 1, 2, and 3. Super Saiyan 4, favorite transformation of all of Dragon Ball. I will say Super Saiyan God, super dope transformation, but the movie does feel a little bit told around that transformation. It's cool, I think it's done really well, but then we get to the Frieza movie and we just got Super Saiyan Blue for no reason at all. Like, it just pops up. I'm just like, we just got a new transformation. Not even what, by that point it was like 2-3 years before, and then you're going to throw another new transformation out that has absolutely no explanation, and you're not going to further build on the legend of this legendary Super Saiyan that you built up this whole time. You're just gonna throw it out the window and give me Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, or Super Saiyan Blue as it's later renamed. But you know, it just rubbed me the wrong way, where Daima is the opposite. The story takes the forefront. Transformations like Super Saiyan 3 for Vegeta or Super Saiyan 4 for Goku are just things that happen along the way, which is important, because I'm not saying that Toriyama couldn't have had these ideas from the get-go or made Daima expressly for them, but the thing is that they don't feel like it. I shouldn't be able to look at your story and be like, oh, you're only telling the story so that you do this, you're only telling the story so you can do that, and then sell it to me in a game. Because that was one of the biggest things with Dragon Ball all the way back in 2015, you know, when we first started getting the Xenoverse things, because everyone was like, yo, I'm so tired of just getting redoing the same Dragon Ball story every single game. I'm so tired of it. So they started doing the Xenoverse, and then they started introducing new content that could be told within these games so that you could sell to us, or maybe some new toys or something like that. I'm just saying, don't just make a story just to sell me something. I know that money is the end all be all of everything and as to why it's being done in the first place. But at the same time, you need to respect artistry. And I know this is where I always end up with these Dragon Ball Super videos, is that you need to respect the artistry of what's happened. And once you respect the artistry, the money will follow. But that's the video, and as usual, I really hope you guys enjoyed it. You know, please continue liking, subbing, commenting down below. Let me know down below what you guys think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Dragon Ball Super is great, and maybe Dragon Ball Daima is still good too, and I'm just a hater. But let me know what you guys think. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.